Welcome to the Positively Star Wars Senate podcast. This is Obi-Wan Kenobi. May the Force be with you.
Looky, Senator. Decent Jedi arriving.
Let's make this our best show ever!
I will sign no treaty, Senator.
I am the Senate.
This is the way.
Hello, Star Wars fans, and welcome to Positive Star Wars Chat, because this is the Positively Star Wars Senate podcast, coming to you by the power of the Force and with little help from Zoom. This episode is number 72 and is recorded on the 18th of May, 2025 AD and all that. But before we get going with the show, it's time to have a little quick word from our sponsors for this episode.
Have you seen Star Wars? Remember that scene when Luke Skywalker lassos that thing and the princess kisses him and they swing off together? Oh, okay. The real reason I'm here is to tell you Magic Market's got Star Wars cups with all the stars' pictures on them. To get one, just buy a Snowbiz made with Coca-Cola for 49 cents. Oh, boy, that tastes good. Oh, hey, yeah. Do you remember the fight with the laser swords when Darth Vader meets Obi-Wan Kenobi?
Thank you to our sponsors, helping as ever to keep our inflating D+ subscriptions going and everybody happy as we are always. But anyhow, my name is Stephen. I am the only British member of the crew. And yes, I am in England. Yep, I know. It's amazing. The rest of the crew comes from across the pond of water to my west, which is on my left. Not that that matters to you. And can't do Skype order anymore. I can do Zoom order. And we have, when she's not controlling the cat, she's here chatting to us. It's Marie.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, Marie. I haven't thought of a script in this one. He's mad for Jar Jar, and he's just our audio guy, our IT guy here, keeping us on the airwaves. Editing things out, probably editing out all this in a minute as well. It's Ricky.
Oh, I am mad about Jar Jar because he's not in the battle pass for Fortnite.
Well, we will have a debrief on that in a minute. And he wasn't in Andor, which I think was the biggest letdown of the whole thing.
Oh no!
Yeah, I know exactly. And we also have he's flexing his muscles and putting off his favourite wrestling moves. It's Ryan.
Hello there.
And last but not least, he is the godfather of our podcast. It is Ron.
Greetings and salutations, fellow senators, Chancellor.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for joining us on Zoom. It's a bit different. Everything looks the same, but feels a little bit different to Skype. Rest in peace. We're trying Zoom this time round. We might well try something else next time round, but thanks to our sponsor this episode, which is Marie, who is paying the Zoom subscription that's enabling us to all chat and record. So thank you to that. So yes, it's been a while since we chatted, and bizarrely, we were just talking beforehand. We haven't actually talked about anything in Andor since the first 3 episodes dropped, which is bizarre to believe because it feels like we have chatted before. So we'll talk about Andor. We'll probably talk a bit about Celebration, because apparently we haven't talked about that either. And May the 4th, of course. May the 4th has happened since we were... No. May the 4th did happen since we were last on here, but we didn't talk about it. We did the first arc.
Spoiler warning! Spoiler warning!
So the second arc was... let me see, I'm going to summarize this because I don't know. So, of course, every arc is 1 year along the line, of which this doesn't say how many years behind did we start off with. Does anybody remember? Was it 5? 5? E-Y?
We started in 4, so this would be 3.
This would be 3, that's right.
3 years before Baby Yoda.
3 years before Baby Yoda. That's what I was thinking too when I saw that, even though we already know that is not. So, yes, so the first episode of this arc was Ever Been to Gorman? Cassian and Bix are helping out Luthen. Bix is still having nightmares. Empire arrives on Gorman. Cyril is planted by Deirdre. That's Coronation Street.
Dedra.
Yeah, but it looks like Deirdre. I know, but he takes our position in the Italian capital, Palmo. I mean, Gorman, capital city. He pretended to be sympathetic with the rebels, trying to get in on the inside.
Spiders.
Yeah, all that kind of stuff. Spiders, yeah, cutting out spiders and taking out the inside like some sort of Chinese cookie. Luthen sends Cassian there to check it out.
I think the big thing with this arc, because I don't think a ton happened, but this big thing is that Bix ultimately gets her revenge, right? So
Yes.
That's right. Yeah, wasn't it? That's right.
Yes.
Because I mean, in all honesty, this second arc, not a lot happened. I mean, it was repositioning characters. Saw's in there. He seems crazier than ever. So, but
is this the Saw one?
This is the one where isn't that the one where he's got Will kind of working on the Rhydonium?
Will's doing all
extractor.
that machine stuff.
Yeah.
Phase 1, Phase 2, and all that kind of stuff. And Monfus trying to rally some support.
So was the gas that he was
Bill.
trying to mine, was that like the same stuff that killed the what do you call it, the population of the planet with Clack and stuff on Rebels?
Onderon.
No, was that Andor? No.
It was no, it wasn't. I don't think it was that planet. It was the planet that killed. It was the planet where Saw Gerrera was born, where he was mining Rhydonium, and he tells the story of like what happens to you when you're extracting it, and how he became addicted to it.
Like Saw has become addicted.
Well, like the weird thing with me is that whole Willman thing. It definitely made Saw seem like a totally unhinged weirdo.
Yeah.
And the speech and everything was kind of crazy, and then it jumps to the next. Then that's pretty much the end of the arc, and then Willman's just back with the rebels. It's like, okay, well that's weird. He did all this stuff with Saw. Saw put all this trust in him, and Saw just let him leave. So I thought that was kind of interesting because to me, at the end of that episode, it seems like he was joining him. They were puffing gas together, and
like he was ready for the fight. But like somehow, maybe I'd like to know more about. Did he escape? Because Saw basically kept him as an indentured servant.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, there were no girls there. That Wilmot only goes where there's girls he can date.
Apparently so. So Wilmot got bored and left.
Yeah.
There's got to be some benefits to being in the rebellion. This is also the one with the antiquity crest with Young helping out Clea to when the thing got stuck in the bottom of the object as everybody else was chatting at the other side of the room.
Isn't that the third arc?
It's in this arc, according to this.
It's the third. It's the third. I think it's the third episode of this arc. But yeah, this arc.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
Had that in it. It felt like a lot more to look at the 3 arcs and just go, wow, that happened, and that happened. There was a lot that transpired in that 1 year. That the series season 2 ultimately was 4 years BBY, and then each arc is like 1 year later, 1 year later, 1 year later. So this is this arc. I think is 3 years BBY and 1 year previous movie.
It was.
The one thing I took away from it was the whole. I mean, the show's called Andor. There's a lot of ancillary characters we'd like to know more about, but it was about Andor. That he sends Andor to Gorman, and Andor has to learn this alias and all that backstory. I found that fascinating that he's able to keep all of that in his head, and I have friends everywhere, code phrasing and all that stuff. But that Andor's he gets to Gorman, he assesses what's going on, he takes a look at it all, and just like. That's a lost cause. There's nothing. He wants no part of that sort of fight because there's nothing to do there. And Luthen's trying to talk him into it, saying there is more there, but he was boots on the ground. I found it a bit fascinating insight into Andor as a character and his mindset and his smarts of reading a situation and seeing that Gorman situation and saying that
these guys aren't prepared.
It's already lost. That you can do whatever. Feeding right into the Empire's propaganda-ish hands.
Yeah.
It was amazing manipulation between this arc and the other ones, but just to see the manipulation of propaganda and ginning them up and manipulation to get people talking. Even the one Gorman senator or other senators were like, I don't know what's going on there. I don't know. Those people were getting, Mon couldn't get any backing. She's like, look, here's what's happening to Gorman. And she couldn't get backing and trying to tell what happens when they come to you next. And it's like, well, they're doing on Gorman. It's just so deep and layered political and bad guy manipulation of all of it all to get to a point where you were just frustrated for the process and for Andor and the rebellion.
Well, he's like, you guys are gonna do all this and steal for the armory, and then where are you gonna go? He's like, we're staying here. Like, why? He's like, that's not gonna work.
Because they're only fighting for Gorman. They don't see the bigger picture.
The end game, right? The end game wasn't going to be any different. Either way, and maybe part of it too. I'll try to save this for later, or whatever, but I'll get into it to some extent. That we knew about the Gorman massacre, so we know Andor lives, and we know Mon Mothma lives. So there's intense parts of this series that are just amazingly well done, but also, I don't know. I have that perspective as an uber Star Wars fan. We have that perspective as uber Star Wars fan that we know about the Gorman massacre. So we know what's coming a bit. So how does our character Andor factor into all of that? And that's true of a lot of what we watched. I wonder, I am curious. I'll never get that kind of thing. What does this series look like? What does the Gorman massacre and the manipulation look like to a total noob to the Star Wars, this aspect of the Star Wars story that doesn't know about the Gorman massacre, maybe doesn't know that Andor and Mon live. How intense of a show was this for them? How good was that for them?
Yeah, exactly.
Is this the one where he talks to the bellhop too? This is where he first meets the bellhop.
Yes, it is. That's the first time that he meets him.
I like that where they brought up the previous Gorman massacre. I guess they've had lots of massacres. They brought up a couple of them. I guess the one from Legends where Tarkin just crushes 500 people with a ship. And, it's important to hear that Gorman is going through all these problems. And you have a firsthand account where this kid lost his dad, and where at first he's like, I shouldn't say at first, the whole time he knows exactly what Andor's doing. So he kind of hides him. He's like, your name's not even on the list. You were never here. So it's good to see the rebellion, people rising up against Palpatine, because that's what the whole thing is. So, and it's good to see, like they said, it's smaller and smaller things all coming together to make them bigger.
Yeah, I did enjoy that sort of bellhop tie-in, and to hear his story. And you're right, his closeness to the previous thing. I forget. I guess maybe learning about why is Tarkin landing a ship on the square, and with all those people, why was he there? It doesn't really matter. It doesn't really care. I'm just wondering speculative wise, because that was so early on, that monument's built already. That was a while ago, it felt like. So what was the Empire? Why did the Empire care to be on Gorman squishing people with the Star Destroyer? It was just a weird, not weird, but it's like you fought in the Clone Wars. At the time, you don't think anything of it. Maybe there's more to it, type of thing. But it served its purpose in storytelling that the Empire was there. The Gormans ain't happy about whatever it is they did because of how it threw down. And this time, the Empire's being way sneakier about it, way calculated, way more calculated about whatever it is they're trying to do.
It's just weird because, like, to me, like, I don't know. I felt like they made the Empire seem a bit too cautious, because I think they would have just went in there like, okay, we're taking your planet. Like I get it. Like the planet was like a popular planet with the fashion and all that.
But it's not the Empire yet, right? It's still ISB and it's still Palp sort of built. He hasn't built his new.
That's my issue. Like it should have already been the Empire. This was like a couple years before Yavin happened. So it's like.
He called it
full-fledged occupy. I mean, in Rebels we saw they were occupying
planets. Yeah, you're right. Well, I guess he's still a fledgling empire and has to sounds like, seems worried about had to do the political spin. Krennic and hiding the Death Star. They're so hell bent on hiding the Death Star. So while they're an empire ruling with an iron fist, not yet in 3 years BBY. So they're still.
When were they though? If that's the case.
still exercising, getting to that point to where they could strip mine an entire planet, genocide an entire whatever, just take out an entire planet like they needed to for Gorman with all of its precious whatever it had. So I think they still needed to do the sort of political manipulation that clearly they did, because that's what took place in the story in the galaxy at that time, that they felt there was still a need in order to get what they needed to do. But you're right, Ricky. Why couldn't they just go in there with a bunch of ships and just take over the planet and just strip mine away and call it good?
Yeah.
I think that how it comes into play here is that Gorman is a core planet, and also that it's full of humans. And think about the pro-human bias that the Empire had. If it had been a bunch of aliens, they would have moved right in and just done what they needed to do. And
I like the point of a core planet. It's not an outer rim where the information's scattered or not going to get back in time. If that's truly, in the mix and in the core planet, the info is it's just going to gin up more rebellion.
More anti sentiment. That's exactly the entire point.
Well, look what happened to Kashyyyk. I mean, that's already happened, right?
Right, that was a clone. So that already happened.
But the Wookiees weren't human.
Yeah, it gets to that point of
yeah, they're with that whole anti-humanoid bias that the Empire has. I think they want to play this one a little bit careful, because what Gorman does is not essential to the entire galaxy, but essential to very wealthy parts of the galaxy, and you don't really want to make your wealthier people uncomfortable.
So Tatooine, when they're just straight up hanging people in the street, they didn't really care because it was a backwater planet and nobody really
exactly.
But Kashyyyk isn't. Kashyyyk was a main part of the war. They're major traders. Everybody knows Kashyyyk. The Wookiees are everywhere. So I guess that's still a story that I want to see, is I guess the enslavement of the Wookiees, because that's huge for the galaxy too. But you take over France pretty much, and all of a sudden the entire world's all right, that's the last straw. You took over France, and it's well, okay, that's weird.
It's not the world. It's just that you don't want to make your rich people uncomfortable.
Yeah, so they're definitely using the misinformation like they talked about in the first arc. So, overall, I just like to see the growth of the rebellion and how something like a bellhop can even help everybody out.
That's true.
Right, we had Lonnie. He didn't try to escape, but he gave him information. He gave him the Gorman information. He gave Luthen the Gorman information that, I don't want to say Luthen became unhinged, but it is sort of ramping up. I don't think it's this arc. I think it's later where he's, it's all getting too much, keeping track of frequencies and radios and who's where and pieces and all that sort of stuff, whatever, that he's pressuring Lonnie to what's the end game? Why a smear campaign ongoing? That's the reason why he sends Andor to go find out what's happening there.
Right.
But he wanted them to do it so that way it could be we want them to be kind of martyrs, basically. And Andor's I don't want any part of this.
Yeah, no.
There was no value to it. There was being that, there was no value to that whatsoever. Because that's the same arc where it's kind of juxtaposed. But Cyril's there also trying to infiltrate for reasons, but he's trying to learn more about. He's not trying to learn what the Empire's doing. He's trying to learn what the Rebels are doing. But he's trying to learn about things. And I don't know. I need to rewatch it again. Does he eventually come to a reckoning that things are bad, or is he still trying to think? I think that's the next arc. But is he
think? No, that's Cyril. That's the next arc.
He's busy turning the lights off. Or do you try on this one?
He's being kept in the dark in this one. In this one, he has no idea what's going on. Partagaz tells Dedra, "You can never let Cyril on to what's really going on here," and he's basically playing their useful idiot. He's trying to look for information that's not there, and Caston kind of frustrates their effort because he kind of twigs onto that. He's there's no there.
Yeah, maybe that, yeah, Marie, that's beautiful because right, Cassian shows how smart he is. That he's like, yeah, there's no there, and I'm out of here, and it's not worth it, kind of thing. Whereas Cyril is still looking for the there. He's looking for something and really thinks there's something, and just gloms onto it, and to his downfall to some extent. Where Andor was smart enough to recognize what was going on, and like you said, there's no there. There was not, and
These are
ultimately,
just
I don't think it's this arc, it's the next one, right? Ultimately, where they pay the price, where he sends the
yeah.
other two, the ladies, and they do what he wanted Andor to do, and ultimately they end up right where they were. They still had the
Isn't this one where he's like, "This is the greatest day of my life," right?
Cheryl.
Yeah, when he's
Yeah,
like,
when
when
he
he
gets
gets
praised
assignment, yeah.
by Partagaz, and he acts like Partagaz just, just I
He
don't
said
know,
good
just gave
work.
him a
He
million
just said
dollar
good work.
prize.
Yeah, he said good work, and he's like, this is amazing.
How
Because he probably never got that with his crazy mother and everything. The guy just always wanted recognition.
what
Yeah,
recognition, and he was getting recognition for his work finding the bad guys or the good guys, but in his mind, finding the guys he's supposed to be finding that cause problems or whatever.
The rule
And
breakers.
just as a side note, now seems to be the time because his name's been dropped. How good of an Imperial imp was Partagaz, the guy that played Partagaz? Just Tarkin-esque in every way. Oh, I love that performance as well as an imp. Just in his cutting each other off, cutting just the way that was handled and portrayed as a character was a well crafted, well built, well acted character. Love that.
and how he managed that nest of vipers, like he
Right?
yeah, like the ISB is an actual like nest of snakes. I like to call it a bucket of crabs, all kind of fighting to get to the top, and always cutting each other down. And it's like, how good was he that he was managing that and like staying above the fray, but like letting all of them just like um, you know backstab each other and all that. And I mean, we can talk about this a little further down the line too, because
Yeah.
in the end, he's not above it. He's one of the crabs in the bucket.
Got caught up in it as well, whatever. This is
Hmm.
the arc with turn off the lights, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And that was the thing that was like, oh, she's literally and metaphorically keeping Cyril in the dark.
Yeah, right. There was some beautiful. There's another one. Yeah, there's some beautiful imagery like that, and that storytelling, and like I say, that physical and metaphorical, just beautiful stuff like that. Keeping them in the dark, juxtaposition of camera angles to show how upside down or topsy turvy things were. Is such a well cinematically built series as well as a great story. I just enjoyed the heck out of seeing Andor. All dolled up when he went to Gorman as a designer or as a clothes maker or
Yeah,
whatever his
fashion.
undercover what was it,
Fashion.
fashion something, yeah, oh yeah, because they the spiders made silk or whatever and they were fabric, yeah,
Yeah.
whatever it was his I just him all dolled up was a great sort of juxtaposition to the always in the
Yeah.
muck sort of
I was just
Andor.
like, "Yay, Cassian's in this episode." He actually was the focus of that story, which was good. And then like the whole conversation he has with Luthen, and then he's like, "Well, what's gonna happen if it's gonna get lit on fire?" So he's like, "Well, it's gonna burn very brightly."
It's going to burn very brightly. Yeah,
Yeah.
because it's a core world and everybody knows what's going on there. And, you're making your rich people uncomfortable, which Luthen had absolutely no problem with doing that.
Well, and then those guys
But
are so sloppy, and then like Cassian's like, "Or is it okay to talk here?" He's like, and they're like, "Yeah."
Yeah, that
yeah,
that
it's
was a
totally
great.
fine.
You don't know who I am. You're asking me the questions. I could be this. I could be that. I could be the other
Yeah.
thing. You guys are so
Yeah.
bad at this. Such a
So you
great point.
mentioned Andor is finally doing something in the Andor series, but he still isn't the scene stealer. The scene stealer was Mon and Krennic at that party because I loved the two of them just kind of battling wits. And Krennic was brought before the Senate at some point and questioned on what happened and obviously got out of it. But just the tension between those two. And I just love the bigger political meanings of someone
Yeah.
like Krennic, a warmonger who is like the biggest secret project in the galaxy, and then Mon, who's trying to still fight out in the open against Palpatine. But that scene and the tension between those two was fantastic, and I think again,
Yes.
Mon Mothma continues to carry this whole series for
Well,
me.
and it's kind of nice because like Krennic is basically like a combination of Deidre and Cyril. Like he's got like that determination, to get things done, but he wants the recognition the way Cyril does. Like he wants to be the guy that, oh, I took
Ooh,
credit for this.
you're right. You're totally
Definitely
right
right.
that he's trying to, he's trying to he wants to take that credit. He wants to get that credit. He wants that recognition from the Emperor, from Vader, from whoever.
He's
And
Marie, to your analogy, he's in that same, or not the same. He's in a pit of vipers as well, but it's a stainless steel pit of vipers. Or he's in that bucket of crabs, but it's a much nicer bucket of crabs,
Yeah.
whatever. It's just the
Yeah.
higher level people that he's now fighting with, whereas Partagas's crew was a lower level. But it's the same sort of thing that he's fighting with Tarkin and wants the credit, the
And,
recognition.
I mean,
He'll tell the Emperor and all that.
to bring it to a place where like it's it's either the Dungeness crab, he's fighting among the Dungeness crabs, or like the Maryland softshell crabs, right? Whereas they're just like those little beach crabs that nobody's going to eat because
I don't understand any of this crab talk, by the way. Like,
Yeah, I did. Marie, when you brought that up, I did think, boy, that's going to be a real sort of localized sort of thing that you have to know what it means to be a bucket of crabs and
And
how
the
they fight.
rebellion is like butter that's going all over.
But we see it with Deirdre that she gets caught eventually, type of thing. But we'll
Yeah,
stay on this arc that is these 3 episodes and getting to the point, because right, the third one is where they do try Gorman and we lose somebody.
yeah,
Cinta.
yes. But
Yes.
so back to that, this bucket of crabs thing. You put a bunch of crabs in a bucket, and they're all going to try to fight each other to get out of it.
Right, I got the
So-
reference, but when you're doing different types of crabs, I'm like, I don't know what's happening. So
Yeah.
Well, you know what I'm getting at. Like they're like in the nice, they're the nice crabs, the good kind of crabs.
That they're picking at, they're in it together, but they're also picking at each other to climb to the top or stay out of the fray, stay on
out of the
top, or
fray.
stay out of any
But-
sort of trouble.
But he's
I
in a
think.
much nicer bucket, like with the Dungeness crabs rather than the little sand crabs.
well, I don't think it's like that because Krennic is leading the entire thing. Like,
Yes, it
like
is.
Krennic's in charge
Yeah,
of it. Yeah,
he's the
people want-
fancy
people want him to
crab in
win.
that, but he has his own bucket of snakes. He has his own pit that he's in with Tarkin and Partagas and others that he's stepping on or trying to
Yeah.
get to the top. And you'll speak to
Mhm.
the Emperor personally for me, so that was my point, that it's not just one and it's low, and there's 2 different ones. There's a plastic bucket and a stainless steel one that they're the different types of fighting in. But it just speaks to how, well, even the rebels did have it a little bit. There was, Mon and Saul. There was different factions, and they were fighting and stepping on each other. They didn't necessarily sell out each other for gain. Saul did sell out that one guy because of the information that was there. He had, Luthen did, and eventually tells Saul, and had to burn him just because of the information the bad guys knew. But they're not doing it for any sort of gain, whereas the Empire side of things is kind of doing it for a bit of recognition. Dedra does say one time, whatever, you can have all the glory, and the other guy's like, did you ever think, somebody put me in this position because I don't see glory? And she just kind of smiled, and I don't know that I quite understood her motivations there. Was she doing it for the glory, or did she question his line saying, did you ever think I was put in this position because I don't seek glory? And she's like, BS, you do. I know you do. I didn't.
They all seek power. They all seek recognition. So
Yeah, it's the nature of that ISB stepping stone and how you get ahead. I did like Lonnie's sort of. He took the hit. I forget what it was, but it was in the meeting, and Partagas is like, does anybody have any idea? And he's like, yeah, we're arresting too many people. He spoke up in a meeting clearly where everybody else is like looking away and doing the eye dodge and just you don't want to speak in that meeting where the boss is carrying on like that, because it's drawing attention to yourself. So his buddy's like, thank you for doing that, deflecting. What can I do? And Lonnie's like, you can buy me lunch. And it was a very subtle nod to how Lonnie gets his information. He's like, because he doesn't know anything, he can't ask about anything, but if you buy me lunch as colleagues, we're just going to talk about stuff that's going on, and I can glean some information out of it safely. And I really found that appreciated that sort of clever aspect to Lonnie staying safe, but yet able to feed Luthen some juicy information over the years.
Yeah, and I got that he was
He's been
getting
with
that
the
pillow
thing for a
talk from
long
that
time.
dude.
What's that?
I got that he was getting pillow talk from that dude. Like that was, he was kind of like trying to infiltrate that guy's life, and they were kind of more closer than his colleagues.
Relationship wise?
Yeah, that's what I got from it. Like they were kind of
Wow.
flirty back and forth, and that was how he got,
I got 0 of that. I got negative of that, but
you didn't get
to
that he was
each-
assassinating the other guy in the other arc either. It's like little subtle things like that that are nice when they
It
do that.
definitely crossed my mind where I was like, are they a thing now? I don't know. Either that or just work buddies. I don't know.
Well, he can't see his wife anytime soon, can he? So,
This one finishes with Bix getting some sort of revenge and blowing up
yes.
the building. So, that was good. Where I guess she gets one win in the entire series because she gets beat up and down. This is just like the beat up Bix show. So at least she got one win in the whole thing. So that was at least good to see.
2 wins by the end of the series.
No, I don't think so. Being an only parent is not a win.
Well, depends which way you twist it, really, doesn't it? But yeah, I would be kind to agree that'd be a nightmare. But lots of people see having a child as a good thing. Not me, but gone.
And I took her getting back that she was going down a very slippery slope. She was being painted as going to be ending up in a bad place because we don't know anything about Bix. We know where Andor ends up, and she's never in the thing. She was being painted as to being, that's how they're going to write her off or whatever. But at the end, getting the revenge, blowing up the planet, she got right. She got back into the fight and into the fray, and cleaned herself up to some extent to be able to then have that mission and end up going down the path of still staying in the fight versus in the bottle type of analogy, if you will. That was my take anyway.
On to Gorman, that's what I say.
Yeah, so on to the Gorman Massacre arc, as we are known as. So we had 3 episodes, obviously. Messenger, who are you? And welcome to the Rebellion with the 3 years. So we had a little bit of the Force crept into the first episode in Messenger with Cassian with his icky shoulder. Was it his shoulder? I think it was.
Yeah, he got shot at some point.
Yeah, and it wasn't Heenan, and so he went and saw a Force Healer. There's Force Healers working on Yavin. So yeah, of course, we get the operations on Yavin is beginning to look a lot more coordinated and stuff. So that's all. That's blah blah blah.
But yeah, I guess the big one. Yeah, the big one. That
Goes to
episode 8.
Gorman,
Yeah, the big arc of this is obviously the Gorman massacre. So,
which is like, who are you?
Yeah, which it's not as massacre-y as I thought, but the way they explain it,
Yes.
when he gets on the radio and they're like, "There's
Hang on,
thousands
we had a
dying."
chat about this, and you were
Gorman incident.
You were bigging up how deadly it was.
Yeah,
and
like
me
I
and
was
Ricky
saying,
were arguing that it wasn't much of a massacre as we thought. I don't really think we should be.
They were armed, and it was a battle. It was a conflict. It wasn't a massacre.
if people only take the context what they see in the battle, yeah, I can agree. But it's the extra stuff where they're like, "Oh, now they're roaming through the streets." Now it's the recorded message where they're like, "They're killing thousands." Like if that single line
Yeah,
wasn't
but that
in
was
there,
an imperial. That was an imperial report.
no, it wasn't.
No,
it was people trying to get away.
It was the girlfriend of Wilmot. Like
Yeah,
that was in Drino's radio transmission.
There were also imperial reports, weren't there? There was all the news reporters were imperial.
Mm-hmm.
So we can't take anything that they were saying.
Yeah, that episode was a lot of tension, and the build and the writing and the directing and all that stuff. What I say this show's all about. It was just great. I mean, it was just to see it all rise, and I can't help but continuously mention how real worldy this entire show feels. Like this rise of the rebellion, this like increasing power of the government official is too real to ignore. Like these are all real feelings people have all over the world right now. And we're seeing it play out in Star Wars more accurate than ever. I mean, there's always the things where it's, oh, this was about the Vietnam War. Oh, this was about trade deficit with other countries. Like Star Wars has always had a loose connection of real world stuff that kind of vaguely connects. But this is 100% rooted, like, and taking examples. I mean, you're bottling people up and then gassing them and then blaming them for attacking you. Like, come on, this is real world. So it just makes this entire series so much more powerful when we can look. We don't have to look 50 years in the past. We can look 50 days in the past for countless examples of fascism rising and all over the world, that type of thing. So it's just incredible where you see this build up, the planning of bringing in these. And I didn't get it at first. It's not something I really connected, but all the rookie troops just to lead them out there, and then the Empire
Yeah, they were
shoots their
cannon
own
fodder.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Empire shoots their own people to blame. And those things happen with all the riots we've had in the past couple years where it's like, oh no, this political party did it. Oh no, these people did it. And they were dressed up as somebody else. And that's what caused it. It's like exactly what you see on screen where whoever this fixer is that's working with Dedra, where he's just like, no, I'm the trigger, you're the finger. So it's like you're still in charge here, and she has to say to pull the trigger. So when that starts and it shoots, and then they just start shooting the crowd, and then they're just like, "This is what we were waiting for," and they march through the streets and start killing people. I'm just like, "Oh man, this is incredibly powerful." So it's just a great episode of storytelling and TV history, not just Star Wars.
Right, they bring the green troops, and I mean that seems a great ploy of the fixer. There's like that. Hopefully, they might have an itchy trigger finger, or they do something to start something, and then the winners get to tell the history kind of thing or whatever. And they're clearly going to win no matter what throws down, but they don't want to start anything, or whatever. They don't end up with an itchy trigger finger, so then he has to go to Plan B and say, fire. And he fires on one of the troops to start off what he needed to have start off in that thing. I thought it was again more manipulation, but genius manipulation to the whole process of everything. I think the Gorman massacre, right? We expected a larger scale massacre. I think we just saw the start of the massacre there in the square and the gore. I think there was a lot more that transpires.
Yeah.
In the vein of the Andor series, we don't need to see all of that. We know it turns into a thing where the entire planet is wiped out.
Yeah, they just go.
I would have, in an awful way, I would kind of like to have seen more on that.
Yeah, more widespread. You had to go by the rebel reports, where you have the news media there. It's like, look at this gang of people. And it's like, well, these people have been subjugated for an entire year. And like, as the Empire rises around them and keeps pushing them down and it keeps poking them and poking them and poking them. And it's just like, and the news people are just, and again, that's so real world where it's like the news is just twisting the facts to make the Empire seem like they're in the right. And then you have these rebel channels where it's like they're just going through the streets killing thousands. And it was just powerful TV overall. And personally, for me, it's just so impactful for feelings of the real world and how I feel it now. And it's just it's just
right.
crazy.
You're right.
The story.
It could very well be a study, a collegiate study in world history, or I don't know what line of college classes or even high school classes you take, where you could show this Andor series and show both sides of it and show from the rebellion side of things or whatever. But you see how, like you say, the news is there only showing, they don't bother. They only showed up once it became the crowd showed up in the thing and is leaning on the Empire. They're not there at the beginning parts as it's a slow burn and a slow build. They don't bother to research any of that. It's not flashy enough. One or two news outlets might, but because of the way the populace hears a narrative coming out of the bigger news outlets or multiple news outlets, that it's kind of this one way, they kind of discount the truth that might be coming out of smaller news outlets or ones that infiltrated or ones that managed to learn some backstory or some, a bigger picture of how all of this started, that then it becomes a propaganda-ish kind of thing, that there is some very real world lessons to be learned of. Don't necessarily formulate your stance on a thing just by what you see on the populist news, because they've got a product to sell as well. While they're supposed to be journalists and not have that as a motive, they do have a motive of being the news that everybody watches that night, because they've got boots on the ground right in the middle of the thing with a cameraman there showing it to you all. So I'm going to watch that. You hear that narrative, and then it gets even uglier if the media groups do then have a dog in the fight. They do have a narrative they're trying to push or something. But to your point, it is a very great study in how how the manipulation took place and how it worked in the Empire's favor to once the fighting starts happening, it looks like it's their thing until it's too late, until the Gorman massacre happens, till it's all over and the planet, and then people are just indifferent or otherwise and then they're worried it's going to happen to them. So it's
what the
an
rebels
amazing
did,
show.
type of thing. So it was
It's
great.
a master class in media literacy, actually.
Yeah.
And,
Yes.
and
Yeah, it very
not
much
follow-
serves as a great example in that type of setting and a collegiate or in an educational setting to watch this, to then discuss the masterclass aspect of media manipulation.
Mhm.
So switching gears a little bit, I feel like we gotta designate a little bit of portion to changing the canon in order to get K2SO on screen. So personally, I was not happy with it. I'll just say straight up outright, I think it was a poor decision on Disney's part. Like, I get it. There's levels of Star Wars fans, some that don't read the comics, don't read the books, don't watch the streaming, only watch movies.
Why?
Like, I understand
So
there's
explain to
levels.
me. I don't think I knew. We had some explanation as to how he came before.
Yes, and that's the thing. It's in a one-shot comic type of thing where it's just a simple mission that Cassian goes on. Really nothing crazy happens. It's not during the Gorman massacre. It's just he goes on a mission and he needs the droid and he reprograms him to help.
Yeah,
So
it's ridiculous.
it's and there is ways around it where I accept it now, because now what I've seen some fans say is that comic was the official story. Well, not maybe not. It was the story that the rebels used, but what we see on screen is the real story.
Media manipulation. Wait, the good guys are now manipulating this story too? Oh, jeez.
They manipulate the story as much because they want the eyes as much as anybody else does.
My head's spinning. No, the good guys don't.
I only recently read the comic, well, about 2 months ago, because I thought I was curious, better find out, and it's ridiculous. It's more fiction than this is fiction. I mean, as far as I remember, he sort of just swaps a few wires and presses a few buttons, and suddenly he's K2SO. He's a rebel supervising droid, and not a.
Well, that's what he does with this one. Why it brings up the point? Why does he even take the droid? Like, why does he take the droid?
No, but
he could just run the droid over and run away.
In the comic, all he does is swap a few wires. He ain't got no programming. There's no programming going on in the comic. It's ridiculous. But
so you're saying the comic is almost like where he throws a switch from bad droid to good guy droid.
Yes. He swaps a few wires, and suddenly K2SO is on this side.
Yeah, and I'm not arguing if the original story is good or bad. It's just that as someone who sticks up for Disney and has a lot of positive talk for Disney and what they're accomplishing, I've said it several times. This is the golden age of Star Wars, in my opinion. The stories and the dedication to canon. But when you have people like Gilroy, Filoni that ignore canon, and in my opinion, this is the most egregious, ignoring of canon. Where Filoni, I just felt like it was complaints. It's like, oh, you changed it from day to night. The weather's different. I don't really care. It's like, yeah, it's annoying because I stick up for Disney. Now I have to defend the stupid things that I rallied against in Legends. And now they specifically ignore a comic. And even if it's mentioned to say, oh, well, we need to come up with a cover story, just say that you rewired him on whatever planet it was. Then it's fine. We can say that comic is Cassian's story and how he got K2SO. But to me, as of right now, and again, I'll work past it. Like I said, I'm already accepting the fact that the comic is Cassian's story. What we see on screen is the real world story. But it still sucks that I put a lot of time into canon and defending Disney, and Gilroy spits in its face. So
Ryan,
I'll just
now
say
granted,
I'm
my story is going to be the maker himself versus Gilroy, something Johnny Come Lately, or whatever. But to hear you say, I'll deal with it. That was, I've ranted on this before. That was my take with Maul. There's an interview somewhere where George is like, I learned my lesson with Boba Fett. I made sure that you knew he was dead. He was bisected and fell down an endless shaft or whatever. And somehow that punk's back. but he's only back
Yeah.
because George himself said, "Yeah, we'll figure out a way to bring him back." So I have to be okay with it, kind of thing. But it's just, I know what you mean in terms of that sort of feeling of betrayal or feeling of knowing the whole story. And wait, you've changed something over here. That's a thing, but they knew they were going to have a challenge trying to keep it all in check. And that's somewhat sometimes the problem where you said it was a one shot in a comic, so it's
like
not
a
a whole
different
lot of
situation,
backstory and feed that they go and fill things in because people are like, hey, what happened? We want to know how Cassian got the droid, so they fill things in somewhere, and then later they get the opportunity to like really draw within the lines and use fine tip pencils this time instead of crayon and really paint a picture. And that picture, they had the color over the one that existed so that they could get to this one. It's
There's
the nature of
a way
what
of
it is.
doing it without having to go, completely different story than the comic book. You could have did it another way.
Well, like you say, if there was a comment in there of, here's what we did, but and there
Yeah.
still could be a comment to some future, whatever, of, the cover story is we just reprogrammed him, but we actually got him from the Battle of Gorman, whatever kind of thing. But
if I
Star
can
Wars is
interject,
always what's on screen, so they'll really have a problem, I think, with fandom. I mean, I think they'll really genuinely have us up in arms if something on screen then contradicts in such an egregious way as this, as Ryan's pointing out, something that was on screen. That one will, I think, really be a hard pill for everyone to swallow in terms of the way what. I guess Maul was that way. It was on screen, he died, and
I was going to say
that he's
Maul was
back.
that.
But that gets an asterisk because it was George, I guess. Right. I was a huge, just never a fan of that because he died.
That's different though, because like we didn't see like Maul come back to life in a comic book, and then it was different on a show. That's
Touche, right? We saw him on screen. That was my point. That we saw him on screen come back, but
like, yeah,
so
he
right,
brought
it
him back
wasn't
and
it wasn't a
probably could've
change.
been-
You're right, Ricky. There was no change in it all. It just that's how it transported. So that's how I've come to terms with it. That's the story. Some witch claps her hand, says hocus pocus, and he gets legs. Well, okay, whatever. I don't know that I think that's how it should have, but that's how it happened because I just watched it. So right,
Yeah,
there's
but
no
you didn't read
change
about it happening
right. There's no
some other
change
way.
to how it happened before. There's no contradiction at all. That's how it happened on screen. So that's what makes it different.
if I can interject here, Luke and Leia originally were not intended to be brother and sister.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
we
but
did
that wasn't
that.
otherwise
Yeah,
specified
there's
in the
a whole
movie.
lot of not
But there
intended. Sure.
wasn't.
So canon
was
is very
there
flexible.
media? Yeah, but it's different from telling the story and then telling the exact same story again. There's a huge difference.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There
yeah.
is media because-
That's not changing canon. That's changing what we learned from the
evolving the
making
story.
up.
No, not necessarily, because Splinter of the Mind's Eye, which was a novel written by the author who did the Star Wars novelization, Alan Dean Foster. He actually wrote that under his name, not George Lucas's. They're still not brother and sister. They're basically a romantic pairing.
Yeah, and that was supposed to serve as a sequel until he made the sequel.
Yeah,
So, I
until
mean,
he made the
that's-
sequel. And then Empire Strikes Back, they're still not really brother and sister. And then we don't learn that they're brother and sister until Return of the Jedi. So canon has always been very flexible, is my point.
Let's get back to Andor because George made it up as he went along. Everyone likes to make it. No, he knew we can't do that with the sequel, but he made it up.
Like the books weren't canon with George Lucas. That's the difference. George Lucas never considered books and comics and TV shows
Especially when he
canon.
was making the OT.
That's
Right,
just the
true.
fact of it. Now Disney is specifically saying this is canon, and I have been a proponent of Disney, so it's like that's what I'm upset about. I have to go and defend Disney against all these haters, against the stupid, I have to defend against Marvel, defend against Lilo and Stitch, redoing all these movies and the Mulan stuff. Like, I feel like Disney's making good decisions, but then when they say, well, everything's canon for Lucasfilm, and it's like, okay, nothing before was canon. There's no way in hell George Lucas would have followed the story of clone Luke pulling universes out of the freaking sky and controlling black holes and planets crushing Chewbacca. George Lucas was not going to follow those stories. So to say that Disney's the devil for redoing something that didn't matter anyway, but when Disney says this is our canon, and then Tony Gilroy and Dave Filoni step on it all the time, I get really frustrated when they do stuff like this. But like I said, I will move past it. In my opinion, to shelter my hate, what we see in the comic is the Rebels story of it, what we see on TV, which is the bigger media. It will have more fans, and the discovery of K2SO is something that everybody wanted. So I will
I'm going to
accept
give
it.
you a hard time, Ryan. There's only like 500 of you that saw that comic anyway.
Yeah, that is true. It's only a very small number. A couple thousand people actually own and read it, and a slightly bit
But
more.
to your point,
Yeah.
your beautiful point, it was they're trying to say it's all going to blend together and be canon, so they need to get better at it. I fear though that if we get up in arm, as the fan base, if it was truly to something that got up in arm, then they'd be like, well, geez, we can't do much in the comics for fear of stepping on things, or we can't get good directors like a Gilroy because we have to say, oh, you have to be beholden to X or this Y or this one shot. It's a challenge is basically what it is. It's just going to be difficult for them to.
And that's why I say Disney was a great
I
choice
hope they keep
because they're big enough to control something like this. Like George Lucas as a single man, like it grew beyond anything he could ever control, and I respect him for passing it on while he's still alive instead of a giant bidding war. So Disney, I think, is a great choice to do it because you want to give it to Fox, who can't handle X-Men, or Sony, who dropped the Spider-Man ball. Like, give me a break. Like Disney at least has hits with Marvel, so it's like I respect
Warner
it.
Brothers, who keeps trying to create a universe that just
it doesn't work.
isn't taking hold.
Like still, so I think Disney. It's not all positive. So I will say I'm not a diehard Disney person, but a lot of the stuff they complain about is like mediocre at best, and it's just blown up into front page news because it's Disney and it gets clicks. So I don't want to drag it down. So we can
because we got it. This arc and the third episode of this arc is just right. Isn't the title the Welcome to the Rebellion? I mean, it's almost the quintessential part of this whole show, but it's not because we wanted to all see how Mon gets to that point or whatever, and the Andor line or him rescuing her, it was intense.
Wait.
I can't even talk about it.
Wait, Ron, wait. I'm sorry to cut you off, but I at least want to touch before we move on to that amazing scene. I feel like we should touch on the death of Cyril, just so we stay in order of the story, because Cyril died here, and it was just kind of crazy that he's just like, I don't even know who you are. Like, poor Cyril, hunting this man for years, he's being infatuated with it, and then he just gets shot in the head, like. So I just felt like a quick touch on that at least. So I didn't know what your guys' thoughts were on that, and then 100% we'll cover the Mon stuff. So I
I appreciate it. I appreciate you keep. I was okay with it because it's this. I know, and I kind of worried or thought fans and people would be like, "Oh man, that's how he goes out," and what a shame. The series is called Andor. It's about Andor and the characters that shaped him and the stories and the scenes that shaped. So Cyril was a bit player in the role of Andor and what Andor. Now we saw a lot more than a bit player's role, but for him to go out like that, not taken out by Andor, because Andor has no idea who he is. Clearly, who are you? For him to get taken out by the guy that he betrayed, all that sort of stuff. It was just all right. That's Cyril's. I didn't have a problem with it because that was Cyril's ending. Even though we saw a lot more and some might have thought or expected more funny thing. It's going to be the same later when we talk about Dedra, but just the show's called Andor. It's about the stories, events, characters, and players in his life that creates or shapes how he gets to where he gets to, kind of thing, whatever.
And it's something I didn't even realize, like where he's just like, I don't even know, and I'm like, you're right. Like Cyril's always been a step behind, searching for him and getting closer and closer. And Andor's just out doing his own thing, his own rebellion thing. And it's like when he said, "Who are you?" I was like, that's a great point. Like Cyril ruined his life searching for Andor, and Andor just kept doing his own thing with no effect. So I thought it's so small, but again, it just feels powerful. Like, and then he dies, and then Andor's like, well, what was that about? I can imagine he's afterwards like, who was that guy? And it's just like crazy.
Cyril was super obsessed with him, and he had no idea who this guy even was. He had no idea he was being tracked down by this like Imperial flunky.
It reminds me of the Simpsons episode where Mr. Burns doesn't know Homer Simpson's name, and he's just like, "I'm sorry, who are you again?" And he's like strangling him, and he's like, Homer Simpson, and he's just like, "Who are you? Who is this buffoon?" It was just a little comical, powerful, and sad all at the same time. So I
You're right.
definitely felt like Cyril needed some, a little bit of a focus point because he was a good character. I was happy to see him get his own office in the previous episode. His mom was proud of him. He was getting praise from the ISB, so he was like, things are going good. But really, he's just a little cog in the gear for Dedra manipulating things to get access to everybody. And it's like, boy, Steel's life just kind of sucked, man. It's poor guy.
Yeah,
You know,
he was
and
getting used everywhere.
thinking about it, I don't think Andor ever does like where or how would he ever learn who that guy was that attacked him on Gorman? Or, why would he ever care to ask? But who would ever have the information to tell him that was the guy that was tracking you down from the two guards that you killed back on whatever the planet? That just he never knows. He doesn't need to. It's not going to shape him. It's not going to affect him in any way, shape, or form. But he also never finds out about it, kind of thing. But it at least we don't have to deal with a Cyril. They explained they found a way to get rid of Cyril, and it didn't need to be anything. I think any other show or any other creative or any other thing would have had the boss, had those two meet up. Well, they did meet up, but have those two and have Cassian take him out or whatever. And there's no reason for Cassian to take him out because, like you said, Cassian's "Who are you?" line is perfect in terms of I have no idea who you are. Why are you fighting me? Whatever. So it was an interesting part of storytelling that most other things don't get because they do go a bit cookie cutter-ish or tend to, take the easy way out or have that sort of simplistic solving of a problem and have them and they take one out and move on to the next thing or whatever. That I agree. I thought it was very powerful in what it was.
The thing that I got was that it absolutely subverted my expectations because I was expecting Cyril to turn. I was expecting Cyril to wake up to what was going on here and kind of and be like, oh, you guys are using me. And he gets that. He cottons on that he's being the useful idiot for Dedra all along. And that scene was visceral. That scene between the two of them was
when he choked her.
I agree. I did have a bit of I think he's going to turn. It was like, is he going to realize and turn on them? But
and so, like, I seriously thought that Cyril was going to end up being a rebel and fighting alongside Andor, but they subverted my expectations completely and just like took him out. And that's also beautiful. That's absolutely beautiful because it's a fitting end to what Cyril actually was. He was a non-entity from the first.
Oh, harsh but true. Harsh but true. It's unfortunately what it is.
He lived as a flunky. He died as a flunky. He was the useful idiot, and he outlived his usefulness. And bam, that was it.
And it just makes a shocking moment for a relatively big character.
Yeah, it's absolutely shocking, and it's just like, but wow, that's actually fitting. I was like, that makes a lot more sense than having him turn and fight alongside Andor. It was like a little disappointing, but at the same time, it was brilliant because I was like, you completely went against what I figured was going to happen.
Yeah, I agree. All right, so Ron, you were back on your track again. You had a great opening to the next episode, so please continue because I would like to touch on that as well.
Well, is it the next or is it the end of this? It's the end of the third one in this arc, right?
It was the massacre, and then the next was the Senate reacting to the massacre. So
the second half of it, right? And Mon's speech, and just her. Well, the lead up to rescuing her, and the infiltrate or the double agents that were to rescue her that were they Luthen or no, they were Bales, I think, or whatever. However that transpired and all, and it ends up being Cassian to rescue her. Obviously, because it's Andor, it should be him to do it. That's a line from a next episode of course it's you type of thing, whatever. But her shock and awe to her driver getting killed, I think it was, right? That she says he's an ISB agent, and Andor doesn't give pause, doesn't give no quarter, nothing. He just shoots, just like, all right, well, we're not dealing with that. We got to get you out of here kind of thing. And she's freaked out about it. And he's like, yeah, welcome to the rebellion. It kind of feeds into his, I've been at this since I've been 6 years old kind of thing, or whatever, that when people carry on or complain or have a bit of a shock moment kind of, he's like, yeah, welcome to the rebellion. Even though she has been in it, he doesn't necessarily know her whole backstory, but he's been in it in a very different, gritty way than her posh way of being in it, but still, nonetheless, they are both neck deep in it and need to get out of there.
As far as the rebellion, she's only had a toe in the crab bucket, where he's been neck deep in the crab bucket the whole time.
Yeah, right.
Sticking with the crab theme. So
yes,
but yeah, but the speech, I've watched that so many times, and again, it's like so powerful. And I've seen some remixes on YouTube with the same thing they did with the scene with the original Obi-Wan Kenobi talking to Luke, and they interject things with like, oh, Anakin, he was a brave warrior, and there's like this war music. I've seen clips of that with like her speech, and it's just the straight through speech, no cutaways, the clips of the show, the clips of rebellions, and it's like, the force be damned. It was so powerful. And as much as I spit on Tony Gilroy the previous talk, I must say this, whoever wrote this speech and the scene setup and the directing, just this group of people that did this, like Andor has these ups and downs with me where I fall asleep watching it, or I'm amazed and I just stare blankly at the ceiling for an hour, because it's just digs to your very soul. The way, the tension, they're trying to shut down the broadcast, but there's people who want her to speak, and they're like, sorry, we don't know how to get in. They're not really rebellion. It's just people rebelling type of thing. They don't have to be part of the rebellion. They could be the bellhop, where they just don't report you. They could be like, I don't know how to get to the door. And when she's just like, and his name is Emperor Palpatine, and they turn off the lights, it's like, I wish we could swear on this podcast because I'm holding back, but oh my God, like Wookiee screams. This was incredible. And, Andor just has massive swings for me. And it's just some of the most filling episodes I've ever seen, where it's like, God, this is drawing on. But then you just have a speech in front of the Senate, or a ship flying through the sky, or an escape. And it's like, this is the best television I've ever watched in my life. So, and it's just, the speech was incredible. It was a perfect double episode arc. It was some of the best TV I ever watched, and it was
Ryan, where I think it's
replayed all the time.
Where I find it fascinating and compelling is, we know Andor's, there's no reason for me to have been on the pins and needles and on the edge of my seat. I know Andor's fate. I know Mon Mothma's fate. But they found a way to make what I watched that night in the comfort of my own home on my big screen, just the most intense bit of storytelling that I've been a part to in a very long time. And that's what I found was just a gee whiz wow moment of how art can compel you in such a manner that way to have such feelings. Because like I say, there's no reason for that. But
that's a good point.
The two sides of the bad guys trying to shut her down, her with her speech and her words trying to rally a rebellion against this evil empire, and just all of that, and their escape, their need to escape and get out of there safely was so riveting and intense. And why? I knew exactly, that makes me then skew the camera and just makes me want to know, how does that look, or how does that feel to someone who has no idea their fate? Is it even ramped up even more, or is it just they're trying, they'll watch the show? That's what I find compelling about the beauty of the storytelling and the creatives creating such an impactful moments that whole scene plays out like the last half of this episode. That just was edge of your seat gripping movie watching to see that happen. And to peel the curtain a little bit, for her, we talked about her acting and Mon's portrayal, the character of Mon's portrayal. She's doing that in, I'm sure, a green screen or otherwise by herself, probably in front of a camera. What we see on screen, it feels like she's talking to an audience and is emoting and otherwise pleading to her peers, but none of that's there. None of this is real. So it felt like a very impactful and real, genuine and heartfelt and speech, whatever. And that speaks to just compelling and beautiful, amazing acting that needs to be rewarded because of what she did there. Was, like you said, that speech needs to be played. You should watch it multiple times and listen to it and really feel it. But think about then I spin to the other side of the real world of just, man, that lady is on fire in terms of putting it together, not in front of an audience, trying to get them to, not trying to rally any troops. There's no troops in the room with her. There's a camera guy, a gaffer, and a mic guy, and a director saying go, or, action. It's just, wow. It was amazing.
It might be in the volume, but still the point still stands. You're just in a screen and you feel her power as she's just like pouring her soul into the speech. She's walking through the hallway, she's prepping, but then you have this, a real world actor who's just talking to a TV screen. And you feel the emotion in her eyes and her face, the way she breathes, like everything. And I don't know actors and actresses' names, so I'm sure Marie knows. But Genevieve
O'Reilly.
Genevieve O'Reilly. She's absolutely perfect.
Yeah, it was
in this moment.
And I can't even tell really them apart from the original till now. And it really is stunning. And this has been the Mon Mothma show for me, because every scene, and the fact is, it's going back to the real world thing. It feels so real world to nowadays. But the fact is, when you watch the originals, you really just thought the main three characters, they ran the rebellion, and people like Mon were just background characters. Even she was introduced the leader of the rebellion. She's just always felt like a background character until this Andor series came out, and it just filled her in, and you realize it's like one person in front of this fascist leader with, this voice who's trying to stick up for the people. And the fact is, it just, in the past decade, it's just felt so real. Yeah, and that's what gets me with Andor. It's, if it wasn't the time that we're spending right now in real life, it would just be a show. Oh yeah, this represents Stalin or Hitler or whatever. But it's like, no, this is what's happening around us right now. And that's why it just feels so powerful and overwhelming, and the emotions are just amazing with, again, directing, filming, acting, perfect 10. So I'm glad to see the love for this series, as I love for, because it's hard for me to defend my love for Acolyte, Boba Fett, Kenobi, man. It's hard, defending my love of those shows. And then people overwhelmingly love this. And it's like, oh, okay, so this is what it's like to be a Star Wars fan, where people just like things until you say it's slow, and then I'm the idiot. But whatever, that's different. This was perfect in their speech and the escape. Switching a little bit, like when they're at the table discussing kind of the rebellion, I freaking hate those two other senators that always, and this was because I just rewatched.
Well, isn't that real world? Isn't that so beautifully real world? Johnny come lately coming to that, and you're interjecting, and you had no dog in the fight. You didn't lose your daughter, your husband. You didn't lose your family. You don't have anything invested in this, and you're trying to dictate how things should go. It's just like, ew, where do you get off?
Yeah, just who are you?
Zip it. Just zip it. Stop it. Yeah. It was frustrating, those two, wasn't it?
That might be in the next arc, though. I might have.
Yeah, that's in the next arc.
Yeah, you jumped up ahead a little bit. You did.
I touched base with it, and I think I got it backwards. That there's a meme, or I think he says "Welcome to the Rebellion," shooting somebody else or whatever. But it's when he shoots her driver. They're outside or whatever, and he shoots her driver. Yeah, that's where I think it really sort of hits home to her, because that was her. He's like, look at me. He's trying to rein her in the moment, because she's really freaked out. I don't think that was the rebellion piece of the line or whatever, but that's where it sort of hits home for her that she's, because she lost the driver, even though he was an ISB agent, she knew it. It was still Cloris, I think, right? It was still somebody that she was tied to, or otherwise a thing that all of a sudden he's dropped by a laser bolt from this guy that's rescuing her, kind of thing. That there's a screenshotted scene that I've seen people trying to make a meme of, she's got this oh my god face. They capture her in that one moment in time or whatever, and Cassian's as cool as a cucumber because he just blasted the guy, but he's like, take my hand. He's like, look at me. He's like, come on, we've got to go. We've got to stay focused, stay with me, stay in the now. We've got to, and that beautiful scene. I don't know if that building is real, or wherever they were outside that they're escaping, whatever. None of this series looked cheesy at all. None of this series looked CGI at all. None of what I watched in all of this looked, it all felt, it all just seems so absolutely beautifully real, that it's another testament to Lucasfilm and what they're creating, that they're able to create such realism in acting and story and in scenes and sets or whatever. That's just beautiful. That outside shot of them escaping down the steps,
and to just have a reference so everyone here that understands, like that scene you talked about where Mon and Andor are outside running, just so everyone recognizes and can understand the reference, we'll say that Mon is a soft shell crab and that Andor is a dungeon hard crab. So just so you understand the reference or really key in on the crab thing, just so they're
I
all in
don't
the same bucket.
think any of that translates any way, shape, or form. But I'll let you have. I appreciate the try.
We'll let you have that one.
The
Because
bad guys were.
Soft shell
Dungeness crabs
crab
are
is
harder to get.
Mon.
These
and
guys aren't
dungeon crab.
crabs picking at each other. That was the bad guys. But yeah, to bring it up. All right, so that arc kind of ends with them rescuing Mon and trying to figure out. They still got to get off Coruscant, or they got her rescued, but they still got to.
They've got to get her to the safe house.
But where do they go to Yavin? Obviously, that's where they go. But somehow they got to escape Coruscant, which shouldn't be too hard.
But they're still waiting for her ride, right?
That's what I'm hemming, because then that's how it dovetails into what is sort of canonish in terms of Rebels and the Y-Wing group and Gold Squadron rescuing her, but she had a different speech, but that was like a different speech or a second. I don't know. I did watch that Rebels episode, and boy, when you watch Rebels, you can see the storytelling is very kidified, cartoonish, and 22 minutes wrap up, because it was just quick, and here we go, and here we go. It wasn't. They just don't get a chance to expound on anything, but somebody else rescues. So Cassian gets her off of Andor, but then they've got to rescue her and get her to Yavin, the Rebels crew. So there's a tie-in of sorts that I needed to try to make a bit more sense with, because there's a speech in there, but I thought I saw somewhere on fans there's she makes a second speech somehow.
Yeah, and me who ranted about the breaking of
Right.
canon earlier, I feel like this fits a little bit better because they just said, well, there was two speeches. So one's more expanded for TV. That one had more liberty. It's like, because her original speech just was like mediocre, like you said, kind of kidified. And that one that we saw in Andor, like in front of the Senate, was just more powerful. And that one is the one that the Empire is trying to scrub from the world. So that's when and that's a little drop, because where I said I wish they would recognize that the comic exists and say it's a cover story. They recognize that the animated series exists, and they say, well, Yellow Squadron is going to take you, because in the animated series they specifically say Yellow Squadron is going to take you. So they didn't break anything. They just added another speech that's bigger and deeper, and then she had another speech, I guess, with Yellow Squadron type of thing. And I'm like, okay, that one I kind of let slide because like the scene was so good.
To your point, the scene was good, and to your point, they did sort of address Rebels, but I'm going to circle back to a thing I made where Rebels told that story because at the time that's all we had. We didn't know we were going to get the ability to create Andors and streaming shows and all that. So they found a way to fill in a gap that was, well, how did Mon get to, who rescued them? Did the Rebels? Yeah, and here's how she got rescued. She told her speech and had to get off Coruscant, and they rescued her with Gold Squad. So much like the one shot of, well, how did Andor get K2? He found him and reprograms him, switch him some wires. They address things only to find out later down the line of, whoops, now we have the ability to like really address them. So they have a fine line in creating any new material that's in the same universes of things. So that's why maybe they're creating new material that's completely elsewhere. Then you don't step on anything but yourself. So
yeah, but
to their point, they did a great job of dealing with the Rebels show, because it was more than just a one shot. It was a whole half-hour show of having to deal with it, and they addressed it, like you said. They talked about Gold or Yellow Squadron is going to take you, and they just need to find some way to do the same thing with the K2 thing, to say, oh, this is just the story we use.
It's a little different because they stepped around the Rebel episode. They were stepping, but they stepped around it and they made it fit. When it came to the comic, they stepped on it though. So that was my rant before. At least this one, they recognize that this media exists. There's another speech, and I'm like, okay, that one. Because we all make things work. Like, why do the lightsabers allow you to fly? Why do they allow you to fly? We always have to make things work in Star Wars. So it's like, when it comes to that speech, it's like, okay, there was two speeches. That's fine. And I'm like, so that one I didn't have that big of a problem with, because they're like, there's just two speeches. And it's funny you mentioned the Rebels thing, Ron, because I said I was going to watch Rebels before Andor. I wasn't able to finish it because I had to read a book I had to read Mask of Fear first, which to me was more important. But when I started watching Rebels again, it happened to be the episode right before they rescue Mon. So I thought that was just a crazy luck of mine where I had no idea that I turned Rebels back on, and it's like, oh, the episode you're about to watch is the escape of Mon Mothma, and I'm like, how insane of the Force is this? Where
Yeah,
I
right.
just
That's how
stopped
far you made
watching
it in before you stopped. Was right before that is the Force
Yeah,
at
it
work
was
right
so
there. That is
crazy to me
amazing.
where I unpaused it and it's like, oh, this is the episode I'm starting. I had no like I didn't do it on purpose. I just stopped watching Rebels so I can read this book. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna start watching Rebels again. And it's that episode. So I'm just like, man, how lucky is that I got to see it pretty much back to back. So I was just happy with that coincidence.
So
So
the next, right, they get out of there. So you steal or is the
Follow up.
end of that where Bix?
Yeah, Bix leaves and they
Bix
finish the
leaves.
reprogram of K2SO.
Mm.
Yeah, he she has her moment. Do we think we didn't know it at the time, but now that we've seen the entire series, do we think she knows her state at that point in time, and that's why she's leaving? Or part of why she's leaving? Because if he finds out about that, as well as her, he's really going to do things and jeopardize things and just always fear
Well,
for her safety. So
I
does
think
she
he'd
leave?
leave the rebellion. Like
Huh?
if he knew that she was pregnant and if she was still around, he'd probably just leave the rebellion. So, and I
Right.
think
So
that was her thing. And
does
remember
she know
the
at that point when she makes that speech or that video or whatever? Does she know at that point her state?
no, I don't think she just like, you know,
Well,
just
I
held
guess
it all
not
in and
because the
ran away.
next
But
episode. Well, no, I don't know. Somebody could do
well,
some math. The
Ron,
next arc
well,
one
no,
year
it's
later.
let's look 2 episodes back where she truly believed that Force healer, and she said Andor has big things to come. Bix knew that she was going to be a distraction because Andor always had to rescue her. She was having her own problems. Like I
Right,
said, this
Bix
was a
alone or Bix and child.
Bix. It could be Bix alone because she
Well,
knew,
that's what I'm
that
asking. What we think.
yeah, for me, for just me personally, it's I feel like she thought Andor was going to put too much attention on her. So she's like, I believe in the Force. I believe this Force healer that says he has big things planned. I just gotta go. Obviously, I have problems. I'm gonna go hide. And she just happened to be pregnant also. So,
Well,
I mean,
so
that's
I
it just
agree
happens to be.
in watching that episode, but now having seen the entire show, that's where I think I see that scene now a little differently. That while initially I thought it was her just being very big about it all and saying, I need to go because I believe, like you said, what you just said, I believe the Force healer and you've got bigger things to do, and I don't need you holding back because of me. Now I think I don't need you holding back because of what I know. And it's just additive in that way. That is another great piece of Star Wars storytelling, to where it's one way for a while until another piece comes along, and then all of a sudden you're looking at a scene going, wait a minute, that's completely different. Rogue One
And
did so many things have done that to us, that I think that's what's one of the joys of being a original trilogy generation sort of fan, is I've gotten to have all those moments where others will never, just won't get them. I don't know. I just
and
now that I see and think about it and look back, I think the math might work, that she knew why or maybe I'm just now realizing, talking this out, maybe she doesn't know, but her body, that the Force is just something is compelling her to. She doesn't know why just yet in terms of actually knowing herself, but her, her body is whatever.
intuition.
Something's going on.
Intuition.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
also they could just have much better pregnancy tests out there, and she knew right away. Like she's like, "Uh oh, I better bounce." So you could
Yeah.
just say that, but it could have been intuition. Like she's like, "Okay, if we're becoming a couple, obviously they were intimate." And it's like obviously moving along quickly, and it's like, okay, I need to take myself out of here because she cared more about the rebellion, and she knew because of the Force healer that Andor had a bigger part in it. So
Had
she
more
left.
to it. Yep.
Yeah.
It was powerful.
So
It was. I felt for him, but again, it was like, well, it's the series of Andor. Bix was nowhere around, as much as like Cyril and like other characters that are in all of this. It's just like, ew, that's how they get rid of her. Boo! I don't like that, but need more. But it's like, no, I need to know how Andor gets to be Andor, kind of thing, or whatever. And she can't be a part of his journey because it wouldn't make sense in Rogue One at all. But now it's sort of ish does, and that leads us then to the final arc of
yep,
three shows of Andor. What's that third
Yep.
one? What's the title? I missed the chat. What's that third one's title?
Welcome to the Rebellion.
No, that was the
that's the end
last.
of the
I'm
previous
sorry.
one.
What's the first one of the last?
Oh.
No, that's the other one.
Make it stop. Who
Oh,
else knows?
all right. So okay,
And
yeah.
Jed
So it's
Kyber.
the central one that is a powerful episode too. I thought.
Can I just say though that was actually a mirror for Anakin and Padme because they do the exact opposite of what happened with
Oh,
Anakin.
mind blown,
It's a
Marie.
rhyme.
Beautiful. Mind blown. Yeah, right.
It's another rhyme. It's another instance where it
poetry.
rhymes because Padme and Anakin never would have turned to the dark side had he not gotten that overwhelming urge to protect Padme at all costs.
Right. Right. Yeah. Cassian would have done. Yeah. He would have blown up everything for the not blown up, but he would have not been the rebellion hero that he was. Not done any of that had he known what Anakin knows about Padme. Oh, that is gorgeous, man. I love that.
It rhymes because and Bix knows that he has bigger fish to fry. So me at first when I saw that I was like, there's something going on, but I don't know if like she's actually pregnant or because that would be too convenient, or is it that she knows that he has bigger fish to fry and she's letting him go so he can go and like fulfill his path, and then we come full circle, just like, you know what, this is like the absolute opposite of Anakin and Padme, because had Andor known, he would have blown everything up and not done what he needed to do just to protect her at all costs.
I think he would have just left. They would have just left and hid. Like,
yeah, he would have left. He had the credits, and he would just like, I'm bouncing. We're out of, finally a nice life and everything. And yeah, she couldn't. To Ryan's point earlier of the right in the moment or whatever, we just take it as she recognizes what the Force healer says. She sees that she needs to leave so that he can fulfill whatever it is he's supposed to fulfill with them.
And
so it's kind of like an open question. Like you said, it's left open to question. Does she know or does she not know at that moment? I mean, me being a woman, I would be like, yeah, she knows. But at the same time, I'm kind of it kind of gives me pause. So I'm like, I don't think she knew, but she knew because of the Force healer that he had something else that he had to move on to.
Yeah,
and she
in the way the storytelling transpires, I would take umbrage with anybody that said, "Oh, she left because she knew she was pregnant." We didn't know that watching that episode that night. Not a chance. Anyone thinks that's why she's leaving, because that could be a thing. It's because she recognizes that's the bigger picture, and she needs to leave. It's only until the final scene do we realize and look back. And I'm sure the math will work that
the baby
will
goes
work
up
out that she did know at that time, but we didn't.
No, I mean, because the episodes are so compact together, like. So it's just, I mean, they literally escape, get there, and they're trying to get Mon. Like, they're hiding on Coruscant. They move back to Yavin. And then they're let's do a life.
I just kind of,
and then they get together. So
I kind of got annoyed that Cassian at every turn wanted to quit. And like, I kind of from Rogue One, I felt like he was such a true believer in Rogue One, and he like really wanted to, do it for the cause. And I put all this into it, and let's just do it. And then like that's
what Andor the series is showing us, though. By that point, he lost so much. He had so much invested in what he had been a part of for so long that he can't just. He has his buy-in at that point, because he's lost Bix. He's lost his friend in the wheat field. He's lost his mother. He's lost so much at that point. He has to win. He's been in the fight since he's 6 years old. We have to make this happen, because he's anything else would be, all of that would be sort of lost or wasted on it. So I think it paints Andor in a beautiful light in terms of where he's at in Rogue One, because he is so vested and willing to do anything and everything at that point.
But in this show, he's like, every time something happens, like, oh, I quit. And he's like, I'm walking away.
He doesn't have as many pennies in the jar.
Yeah,
he doesn't have season one though. I mean, I still don't understand season one why Marva's speech was the turning point for him to join. But it's like, I don't know. I feel like
because she felt that way all along, and he didn't know that she felt that way.
But like
all
less
along.
than a year before Yavin, he's still like, "Oh, I'm gonna just take off. I'm not really into this." And like I don't know. I feel like he should have been more cemented, like maybe the beginning of the
because
season.
On top of that, Ricky, I think that's why the force healer scene is so important
And
because
that was the turning
he
point for
wanted to
me, was that scene.
he
Like,
wanted to leave. Yeah, he wanted to leave for his mother. He wanted to leave
yeah,
to start a life for Bix. So he had all this other thing, and that force healer telling Bix and Andor just blew it off. But Bix,
yeah,
just watch her in that scene. She takes it as true, and she realizes Andor has tried to leave the rebellion over and over again for outside reasons, and she's one of those reasons. So she's like, okay, I'll have one last good night with him, one of those like cook him dinner, be together, and then I'll be on my way. And he can put 100% focus in the rebellion because he has bigger things planned. And it's really, if it's not for him and like 10 other people, the rebellion wouldn't have exceeded with the Death Star plans. He's a key piece, but he's still a piece of a 10-piece puzzle.
I
So
did
you
like
can't
that
have the whole
the
thing.
Jedi or Force person was like gave him meaning. I did like that. That was like, I'm like, okay, this makes it everything worth it then, because he has a bigger part to play, and he, like I said, that he was the messenger, which he actually ended up being the messenger. To give
And
him the message.
Yeah, and Bix had to leave for him
Yeah.
to pretty much complete that. So
Yeah, and there
Yeah.
was
I think
something
that's what
to
she
it because the final shot, or one of the final shots, he does walk past the force healer, right? He turns
Mhm.
and looks at her and sees her, or whatever.
He he
We've
kind of
got to
like
get to
nods
the
at her, just like very. It's just like a very little nod. You can see
yeah.
his head kind of bob. Like if you blink, you miss it. But like he does like nod at her, like acknowledge that he's walking off to his destiny now.
I hate that we got to rush, but we got to get to the final arc, if you will, or at least talk about the final arc. I mean, the first episode is basically Luthen and the backstory of Luthen and Clea, which was very powerful. I thought was very well done to get
that's
to the
fine.
point of where we needed to get to. But for the Dedra scene and those two finally getting together and the way his speech and another speech where she's like, you're surrounded, we got the building surrounded, and he's like, whatever, you're too late, the rebellion's everywhere, it's scattered, it's out there, you're not reining this in, so good luck with whatever you're going to try to do, have your best kind of thing. Oh, another great speech and another great
Yes.
character moment and pivotal moment in the rebellion and all that. I did kind of worry, I didn't think he fried enough stuff. He didn't have as much opportunity to fry enough stuff, but obviously he did fry the important stuff that she didn't have anything. But yeah, that meeting between those two I thought was fun, was so well done
Yeah.
and exciting to watch and sort of play out until she puts that piece, the ancient transponder or whatever that thing was, and he then he knows at that point what the end game is. Yeah, oh, so good, so good.
Yeah. It was Chekhov's Star Path unit.
There's a scene in that, I'm pretty sure it's that one. There's a shot in that where they're walking up and down stairs or something, whatever, and the camera angle is this jaunty, sideways, diagonal camera angle that I just remember in the moment, literally in the moment, thinking, man, that's some beautiful cinematography trying to portray to me that things have gone sideways, basically. That things are not,
Yeah.
things are just all sort of, Luthen's thing about there's so many, I can't keep track of it all. It's all just, it was a very small scene, very thing, but it caught my attention right in that moment.
They pointed it out in one of the videos that I watched where there's a reflection on the ISB building that's the cityscape, but it's kind of sideways. And I didn't catch it on first glance, but I'm like, oh yes, perfect. Like perfect visual metaphor right there. That this is the moment where everything kind of goes to crap.
Yeah. No, it was her class, it's good, and we learn why. What's the line? Am I your daughter now? And he's like, yeah, when it works.
When it works, yeah.
Did whatever they needed to do to make things work. I didn't catch, what do we think he was? Was he an Imperial, or just on the planet that he grew up on, or whatever? He was a sergeant or whatever he was in that fight. We don't, right? Do we know anything about the fight that he was in and where he rescued this little girl from because he couldn't take it anymore? He wanted
absolutely.
to
There's really no context for it, but like, I get like vibes of like the Highland clearances for in Scotland when England just kind of ran in and was like just basically killing off all the Scots and trying to kill their culture with it. And there was some kind of clearance situation going on from what it seems like.
We don't have any contextual thing. We don't need it. We just need to know that he was caught up in something that eventually
he was caught up in something that was like that kind of turned him into the Luthen that we know today. That was basically it.
It's just
It was
that
it was an
impression of being
awakening.
that way. That's a scene I
Was
highly
it?
recommend if you don't watch with the I highly recommend turning the closed captioning on because all the comms chatter is brought and to me I think
Yeah.
it makes that so much more powerful because you hear all of there's 50 of them lined up, take them out now, or just all of the stuff that you kind of get the gist of listening to. But if you're not listening intensely like you do when you read the words that is closed captioning, that scene and what he's going through and what that character is dealing with in the moment is I think a bit enhanced by having all that chatter, that
Yeah,
comms chatter, in closed caption.
it's like some kind of battle fatigue, some kind of like
Yeah.
PTSD
Oh,
moment for
clearly,
him. Yeah, because he's
clearly,
sitting there
how she
drinking
got
and
on the
like,
ship and is in that thing and I don't know, she clinks something, and he hears her. But anyway, that's the backstory. A nice quick wrapped up in a backstory of how she's as smart as she is to do what she did. I absolutely loved her getting into the hospital, how convenient she finds clothes scrubs that fit her, breaking into someone's locker, but it's storytelling, it needs to happen. But her walking down the hallway and creating the distraction that was taking out, like, the parking deck or whatever the heck it is she took out to
mhm.
get everyone's focus down there, kind of thing, whatever. It was genius, it was well done. But then her
Yeah,
having to take out her father figure, having to do what was necessary for all that they built, having to remove him from a picture and literally, taking away a sunset he's never going to see for others, kind of thing, or whatever. And she's one of those others. Oh,
and
heartbreaking, just heartbreaking.
that ties into his whole thing of building his exit on the way in. His his, that moment with when he like plunges that dagger into his stomach, that you knew that whole time he had been planning, to do something, to take extreme measures just to avoid, just to not avoid, what am I trying to say, to avoid selling out the others, or what, compromising what he's built, I guess. But he built his
Oh
exit
yeah,
on the
because
way in.
Dedra says, in an hour you'll be spilling that whole story to me. She knows she has that creepy doctor, whatever. He was going to
Mm-hmm.
get him to talk, kind of thing, and he knew he couldn't be captured and had to do what he needs to do, kind of thing, whatever. It speaks to Dedra's some part of gas, or the other guy says, she's trying to take down the Axis and it's all gone sideways because she screwed it up because she wanted the not glory, but right, the satisfaction of having that speech and dressed so many different ways. The sun, just all, she wanted to sort of have it. Versus if she just goes in there and arrests him, she has her man. He doesn't get a chance to kill himself. Just none of that's a
Mm-hmm.
thing. And again, there's many moments in this where Andor has a speech earlier about, I just walked in. How did you get the Starpath unit? He's just like, they're so arrogant. I just walked in and took it. That speech and Dedra's actions there and some other moments in the latter parts of Andor just speak to their arrogance and their bravado, getting in their own way or giving the rebellion or giving someone with not nearly as much power or whatever the opportunity to get the upper hand. And that's the case where her arrogance of, I got the building surrounded, whatever, I'm going to go in here and read my speech that I've dreamt of this and make you sweat and see it in your eyes. And if she doesn't do that and just goes in and arrests him as soon as he opens the door, hands against the wall, and cuffs him, then she has what she needs and could win. But no, has to be this imperial arrogance and have that speech that,
Well, also
so
Yeah,
good.
she has to bring the drama.
Yeah.
also on the arrogance thing that you mentioned, it got me thinking that Palpatine's and the Empire's downfall was strictly because his grasp got too big. If it wasn't for the construction of the Death Star, he probably wouldn't have ever been defeated. I mean, it was because you got to think it was, if they didn't attack Gorman to get the metal, to create the prisons, to create the shielding, or to create the dish for the Death Star, then Mon Mothma wouldn't have left. She wouldn't have brought galaxy-wide attention to the rebellion. They wouldn't have blown up the Death Star, and things wouldn't have fallen apart. And then people see the Death Star, the destruction of Alderaan, and then completely turn against the Emperor as he disbands the Senate. Like, he had power, and his greed to create the Death Star is what ultimately brought to his downfall. So I kind of found that interesting, that if they wouldn't have attacked Gorman, if they would have found a different way to use the metal, then they might have been all right, because that really was the turning point for the rebellion, is when Mon left. So, and it's because of that it wasn't tiny little straws, building up to break the bridge. It was one big break. And that's what brought the attention to everybody. They kicked the crab bucket over instead of pulling out one crab at a time, so.
Why
I
does
just thought that was kind of neat.
why does Luthen kill Lonnie? Lonnie tells him, I've had her codes, I've learned about the Death Star or whatever. I guess just the same sort of reason that he ends up killing himself. He's been compromised and he doesn't need him. He says he's thrown it all away, so if he does get captured, he knows he's going to speak and give up Luthen, or they're going to find out whatever they're going to find out. So right, he has to take Lonnie out, right?
Well, the same reason that he has Mon Mothma's childhood friend killed. He's a loose end. He's a
Yeah,
danger to the rebellion.
touche.
That's it. So
At that point, right, he's no longer valuable to him because he's burned his bridge within the ISB, and you can't go back, and you can't go with your wife and family and everything because they're just going to find you. Because he even says in that moment that, how big is this? And he's like, huge. If they knew what I knew, I wouldn't have escaped anyway. So he's like, all right, well, stop playing games and just tell me the information. And Lonnie's trying to use it as bargaining. Another great speech of Luthen's in terms of he's trying to use it as bargaining, but he's like, well, give me the info. We gotta, But he ultimately should have used it as bargaining and said, no, get me out of here, and then I'll tell you stuff because you're just going to kill me. He doesn't know that, but
Urso, Death Star, all this stuff he keeps saying, Jeddah, Kyber crystals, like they're just trying to use this phrase. And after the series, I went and watched Rogue One the next day, and because the rebellion now knows the Death Star exists, and so I was like, wait a minute. They now know the Death Star exists. They know what it is. They know everything. In Rogue One, you think is them learning about the Death Star, but Andor's like, no, they knew about the Death Star a couple days before, whatever the time span may be. And that's why his scene when the guy with because my one question of Rogue One that I always couldn't stand is why a hero of the rebellion killed this guy with a broken arm. It always, as a guy who likes the Jedi and believes in good and all that stuff.
Oh, I never had
why
a
is
problem
he
with
out
that.
there?
That made sense.
No, I never got it. Like, if you're fighting for good, why are you out killing people? But then I see Luthen's scene where he just kills people left and right. And so I'm like, okay, it at least makes me understand better. But then that guy with the broken arm says Galen Erso, and Andor grabs him in the movie, and he's like, "Did you say Galen Erso?" And now that sentence, and that's what Gilroy, and again, I'll give credit to Gilroy, that's his skill. You take one sentence. Did you say Galen Erso? And you gave a whole episode to the meaning where he's like, I don't know what you're saying. Where he's like, Urso, Jeddah, Death Star, Kyber. Just repeat those words. And he's like, what do you mean? Like, what? This doesn't mean anything. And they bring it in front of
those crummy senators also question it and say, well, how do you know you're not being manipulated? And so in that moment in Rogue One, again, when you watch Rogue One, we don't know what he knows. We watch Rogue One completely different now. Because I had the same sort of tact with why does he not kill Galen Erso? He has him in his sights. What made him change his mind in that moment? But now seeing Andor, he's like, wait a minute. This isn't manipulated. That's him. I see him right there. This is all adding up now. I was told by Luthen, Galen, and Death Star and all this. Now that Jin's told me that she's heard of this ultimate. Because in Rogue One, before Andor, he doesn't necessarily believe her. She's the only one that saw the message, and so he doesn't know how much to believe of what she's telling him. But now he has additional information from Clea and from Luthen that someone did kind of put a seed that, well, how much of that can you trust? How do you know they're not manipulating you? But now he's in a different place in Rogue One. It's all very additive for him. It does change Rogue One, I think, significantly in watching it and how you think about certain scenes. And even that particular scene where that guy mentions Galen Erso, that he's like, wait a minute, this is getting heavier now.
It's all falling apart.
Yeah.
I still don't know who that guy is. How did he find out his information? And obviously things are just falling apart, where it's the Empire can't control it all. So that's why he's at the final steps to put this Death Star together, and he immediately blows up Alderaan and immediately disbands the Senate type of thing. And it's just, and then it immediately gets blown up. 20 years of planning is immediately ruined. So Palpatine's a failure in my eyes, but caused a lot of problems. He's still a failure. But and that's what I wanted was, you would think something like Andor, which gave so much to New Hope, now you have 24 episodes or whatever, 20 hours of content that just gives the rebellion and Rogue One so much more information now. Like this random guy who raises his hand and said, yeah, that's my gun, all of a sudden has a huge backstory, and helps Andor in every way, and they're really friends. And it's just like, wow, man, that's why I love Star Wars, because I felt like there's always more stories to be told. It's a big galaxy. You have hidden planets. You have magic Sith. Hey, I discovered a Sith holocron. Hey, this one guy that's carrying an ice cream container running through the hall. Let's give him a name and a backstory. Like, that's why I love Star Wars. I feel like there's always
Yeah.
so much to learn.
It's the you fought in the Clone Wars aspect motif. I don't know what it is, but that part of the Star Wars storytelling is fantastic. That a creative can come in. I've said this before, and if they can, gin up some sort of I've got something to tell about, be additive to it, and it's good. Well, then all right, have at it kind of thing, because there's so many stories. There's so much to the story that is the you fought in the Clone Wars, and off you can run with something that. At the moment during that that was enough that got the job done, but later, or somebody else wants to, you can add and expound upon and make it this vast, compelling, awesome story that we've been going on and rambling on now for a good couple hours, that we gotta get to the end of this arc at least, right? The first episode was Luthen's. The second one was, what was the second of this arc?
They're just killing everybody off. That's what they're doing. They're putting their final places. Like, they got Clea to the safe house. She starts revealing that the super weapon exists. And Hertz team closes on K2SO. And they break into the building because they're rescuing Clea. Remember they used K2SO?
It was just the rescue of Clea. There's not a whole lot going on there. It was intense.
Cool scene. Got to see another K2SO scene. Alan Tudyk's hilarious. So, like I said, it's people wanted to see it on screen, so it's fine.
There were a number of I laughed at myself, laughed out loud, laughed at the screen, literally moments of just some dialogue, some you came in that thing, nice, just some funny moments in a very intense couple of episodes and intense storytelling. That there were some and K2s, there were a couple of K2 ones. I'm not going to remember them at all to save my life, but man, there were some chuckle moments that weaved into some very intense scene, or in between. I'm not necessarily to the scenes themselves proper, but just into the whole episode that made for it was Star Wars storytelling at its finest. That it had, had it all. Good guys, bad guys, everything but lightsaber. It had what it needed for me for Star Wars storytelling, which was just more story being told to me.
And then
so the second one's Clea. The third one then is just sort of the culmination of it all and leading right up to Rogue One.
Yeah, and it really just kind of ended like finalizing some story. Dedra ended up in prison because she was spying on someone else, and then she happened to know the Death Star exists. She didn't care about. She was just like, whatever, the Death Star, I'm after access. And then that information leaks, and then Krennic just locks her up in prison.
How cool was that scene with Krennic? And so glad he comes back. Oh, he didn't come back for he come back and reprised his role, or whatever. But yeah, that scene with her was very intense, and just I found it a beautiful juxtaposition. And I'm sure you had to have seen this. That Dedra just became Cyril in that moment. That she was so focused on what she was doing and trying to do right by her role as being a bad guy. But the bad guy higher up just didn't care about any of it. Didn't want to hear any of it. She's like, they're going to try to run. He's like, I'm sure somebody else has, got it under control, whatever. He was just mad at her in the moment and didn't want to hear anything she had to say, much like Dedra was to Cyril so many episodes ago, that she didn't care anything about what he had to say. And had she listened to him, had Krennic listened to her, how different it could have been for the Imperials, the bad guys. But they're arrogant in their own way, or focused on their own thing, that they won't listen to one of their own. We're back to the crab pot analogy of the pit of snakes that they're climbing over each other and eating, dealing with themselves versus being helpful and trying to get out of that pit. So I love that scene as well.
He's
and
taking his frustrations
sort of poetry
out that
Cyril.
he has with his higher ups out on Dedra. Like he even says in the other scene, he's like, "Oh, you sound like Tarkin," because like, what happened with the program? Why did it finish yet? So he's like, you can just see his frustration that like he's basically stepping on an ant because he's also an ant, that's getting stepped on by the higher
true.
ups.
He's just like, throw her in prison. Yeah. Which I'm surprised they didn't kill her because she still had information on the Death Star. So I'm surprised she just wasn't killed, but she was just thrown in prison.
Put her away on one of the Narkinas. It's fine.
Yeah, so I guess it ends with her being locked up. It has Vale, Clea, and Mon, and Willman. They're obviously I don't
On Yavin.
Willman's an interesting part. They're joining the rebellion. So now
Hey,
it's
what's
like, well,
What's Wellman's tied to Luthen?
Nothing.
Where does Wellman? Where do we meet Wellman? That
he was the son
Cassian
of
has it.
the Bix.
He was a friend of
that had it.
Cassian's and Bix's.
He remember his dad had that shop where she did the communications with. Luthen?
Oh, okay. So that's how he knew Luthen. Willman is the son of the guy that had the radio, and they took out his dad. So he knew Luthen, or knew how long Luthen had been in it, and everything. There was a dialogue between Cassian and him, or whatever, and he had the radio, or they're trying to rescue. And I couldn't remember what Willman's tie was back to it all to Luthen, and that makes sense now. That right, he was the son from back on Ferrix, the dad of the shop with the radio and all that. So he does have strong ties, long ties to all of this, and has lost in this fight and wants to make it worth it, wants to find some value out of it, kind of thing. That he's willing to help them steal the U-wing or file the flight plan so they could get the U-wing off without being shot down, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then it has Cassian and K2 getting in the ship to head to the Rings of Kafrene, which is how Rogue One starts. And I guess the final closing scene, if there's any other things to say, where at least we got to see a small scene of B2, B2 emo being happy, I guess, because that was the one thing I was like, if you don't show me this droid, this whole show is going to be not worth it. But he's happy, and the droid has a friend, and I was like, okay, I accept that for BMO, so I'm fine.
Yeah, and now he has Cassian's mini-me, so he doesn't lose Cass in a way.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't even think about that. The Bix is back on the planet with and gets to have. Now the mini-me. Do we have speculation? I have speculation, but I don't think it's that big of a deal or whatever. But do we have speculation of who that is? I should say.
DJ.
No, I think he's just a kid at this point.
He's going to be a master codebreaker.
Well, so why? And I don't think it's canon at all. I think it's just something that Oscar Isaac just said in his own head. But why do I have a story that Poe Dameron's parents were made on the Battle of Yavin, or made on Yavin? That he told a story that he was created on Yavin. Now I think he told the story that it was after the battle. It was in celebratory aspect of killing or blowing up the Death Star, but that he was created on Yavin, and that child.
It was the second Death Star.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he's too old. This child would be too old to be Poe Dameron.
Yeah.
Okay, that's just where it was just like I needed this conversation amongst friends. Thank you for reining me in that it can't be Poe because the timeline, it was the second Death Star.
It's not Poe. He has a second set of parents. He has another set of parents that are also pilots in the rebellion. But
that's in the comics and may not matter at all.
Could it be Poe's dad?
Gilroy writes a show,
but he wasn't born on Yavin.
Well, you got to remember, this baby is maybe 6 months older than Luke and Leia, right? No, wait, no.
You're about 19 years off.
Yeah, 19.
Yeah, 19 years off.
19
yeah,
younger than Luke and Leia.
He's 19 years younger than Luke and Leia. So I mean, it would work.
It's explained in the comics. So
his
story is explained in the comics.
What's explained in the comics? Poe's creation.
Yeah.
Maybe not the creation. You're reading the wrong comics about the creation, but
his conception.
Yeah, his
conception is
what do you guys read? What do you guys read? Yeah, his parents are part of the rebellion and they're flyers, and they meet and they have a child and stuff like that.
Okay, at the end of the war.
That's what I couldn't mean anything. It is in the comics, so there's not something to touch on because we got to wrap up.
Yeah.
It was definitely a surprise ending where it's like, hey, I got a child. And again, that's where I say this is the pick on Bix, because now it's like one day he'll join me again. It's like, oh, he's dead. Oh, I guess I'm alone forever with this child. So I feel bad for Bix, but it was definitely a surprise. Kind of weird. It's like, in the history of Star Wars fans, if you introduce somebody, they have to be somebody. That's just what Star Wars fans do. So now it's like, okay, who's he going to be in 20 years? If we have the adventures of Luke and Ben Solo, you're going to be like, who's this random pilot? Is that a Andor? I don't know. Maybe the kid's name is Candor. Who knows? So it could be Vandor.
Andor. Okay.
Well, you know what? I'm going to lobby for. Yeah, maybe I do want him not to be anything, because Andor loses, he's doing all that fight for sunsets he'll never see. So it doesn't need to be somebody in the rebellion in the fight. He did all of that so that so people could live there, so that they didn't have to continue on fighting. He didn't do all that so that the fight could continue. He wanted the fight. He wanted people to be able to live their lives, and like he did on Ferrix or whatever. So right, the kid and Bix just go and live their lives. They aren't a part of anything. They don't join up with the rebellion to destroy the Empire or anything. They just go and enjoy the little bit of peace that got created by the rebellion existing, and the Empire is not ruling with quite the heavy handed fist that it might have had the original Death Star not been destroyed. So let's go.
Or he's a Palpatine. I don't know, whatever story you
they all
want.
moved to Alderaan.
I love that. Thank
Everyone
you
moves
for
to Alderaan.
spinning it the other way.
Yeah, they all moved to Alderaan. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Kick
Oh,
Bix
geez.
again.
Wow.
2 days before right before the Death Star strike, she's like, you know what? Let's go visit Alderaan.
No, that's too dark. No.
Bale's like, come on,
Yeah,
let's
that
go to the
is-
palace.
That's
That
Big's
is just
life.
creepy,
Brainwashed,
man.
assaulted, drug addiction, childless, fatherless mother. Like her life is terrible. She might as well
But
just
yeah.
go to Alderaan now. Like
Okay, God.
I'm gonna use. I'm gonna use that. Yep, they moved to Alderaan.
All right. So
And on that note, guys.
on that note, it's time to wrap. I hope you enjoyed our conversation about Andor season 2. I did like season 2 better than season 1. But I am Ricky saying goodbye, and this is goodbye from Ron.
Cheers, everyone. Stay safe out there.
Goodbye from Ryan.
Goodbye, everybody. We'll be talking news and everything else fun of Star Wars at the next time.
Yep. And goodbye from Marie.
Goodbye, everybody.
And may the force be with you.
All right, bye, everybody.
Bye. Nice chatting. Thank you.
Later.
Love this show. Love chatting with you guys. Appreciate it, man. Everyone.
All right, see you guys soon.
Go switch off. I am the Senate.
Be sure to follow us online. We're at Facebook at PSW Senate. Join our Plus 20 Star Wars Facebook group, where we all are in there interacting. You can find us on Twitter at PSW Senate. On Instagram, we're at PSW Senate Podcast. And on TikTok, we're at PSW Senate Podcast. We look forward to hearing from you.
The Force will be with you, always.
This meeting is being recorded.
Okay, so what are we doing? Obviously,
We talking Star Wars Celebration.
so that's so yesterday, but we can.
That's long gone.
It feels like ages ago. Mind you, so does Andor. I've slept a few times since then, you see, so everything seems like a long time ago.
In a galaxy far, far away.
Exactly, yes. Well, you're definitely doing Andor. Well, we'll see how it. Celebration. Anything else? Do we say? Are we doing around the table? We've done that for a while, but we don't have to do it.
Oh, I don't know what I'm not prepared for what I've.
Yeah, I haven't done anything really other than watch Andor, so round the table is kind of, yeah.
So any other news? Any news apart from celebration news? I mean, celebration is
most of it was celebration stuff.
Celebration is really news, isn't it?
Yeah, no, there's like some books and stuff that was coming in, but that was all from celebrations.
Celebration.
All right, so we'll just go straight into Andor. We're going to do it.
Arc by arc, or how would you do it?
I think we're better off just like discussing the series, the season as a whole, instead of going episode by episode. And
Yeah.
then,
Well, the arc as a whole, the final arc as a whole.
Well, everything. Like we only did the first 3 episodes. So like we should like just discuss the whole series, and then
we've only done that. We only chatted up the first 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, only the first 3 had aired by that time.
Yeah.
So there's technically 3 other shows if we were to follow that, right? There were 3 other groups of 3, right? There were 12. So
right, it would
take
us
really
forever.
don't have to do a recap because like it's not like we're doing this as it's on. So
no.
You know? Like who are we recapping for? Like, really, you know? So
right.
I mean, it's just whatever we want to discuss about the show.
Well, probably for me.
You don't want to keep it arc by. You don't want to keep it arc by arc, at least to kind of keep the focus on one arc and then move on to another arc.
Well, I mean, yeah, we can, I guess.
We can
but,
do that.
We don't have to. We don't have to be like, well, this episode, this happened, blah 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 blah. You know, it's going to take forever. You know.
So we did the first arc.
But that's what
the first arc. We haven't done any ones afterwards. Right. Gotcha.
Yeah, let's just have at it. Quick sort of go through it. Yeah, I won't remember. You know, to be able to talk about the arc or which are, unless there's somebody sparks a memory or the arcs have some sort of, I don't know, what was arc 1, what was arc 2, what was arc 3, and what was arc 4's main. What was arc 2?
Nothing happened.
Filler.
Yeah. No.
Filler. Okay. Well, let's just get going and go along with the roll with it, so to speak.
We'll just talk Star Wars. It'll be fine.
We'll just talk Star Wars, yeah.
Yeah.
But we don't need a script.
No.
No, exactly.
We really don't.
No, we can just talk about whatever. We can probably spend most of the time on Andor, and then we can go over the celebration stuff, and then we can maybe touch on the Tales of the Underworld too. So.
Oh man, yeah, there was
that's happened, isn't it?
I forgot about that.
Oh yeah, the Tales of the Underworld.
Yeah,
I don't
we'll
know
just
if
do
I
like
finished
general.
it out, but
we'll just do the general conversations about everything. So that'll be fine.
Okay, so it is recording.
Yes, it is.
Recording? Oh, yeah, it does say recording at the top.
It does say recording. I did press the record button like way early.
We're recording. This is the good one.
Yes.
And that's 5 of us again. Hang on,
Gotta hold down record and play at the same time.
Yep, record and play. Yeah. Okay, right. Right.